What do you do in those moments when you know the Lord has told you to do one thing, but the realities of the moment, or just practicality, your instinct, or being in the real world really require that you do something different? It goes against everything natural to do what the Lord said. What do you do in those moments? In this week's Parsha, Kedoshim, we read in Leviticus 19, verse 18, "You're not to take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am Adonai." It says, don't take vengeance. You say, okay, got it. Thumbs up, Lord. I've got that. But what happens when it's like that dude hit me, or that person cut me off, or that person mistreated me, or they weren't nice to me, so I'm not going to be nice to them? What do you do then? Well, Yeshua tells us in Luke chapter 6, verse 27, he says, "But I say to you who are listening, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for the ones who mistreat you. To the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also." Okay, got it. And Peter was there listening to him when he said that. Peter probably heard him say that on a number of occasions. Peter walked with him for 3 years. He saw Yeshua demonstrate all of this. But, that was the sermon sitting on the mountainside, or that was the sermon when they were in the plain. That wasn't like the dark of night in the real world when things are difficult. Well, Peter was faced with that test in the dark of the night when Yeshua was about to be unjustly arrested. We read in Luke 22, verse 49, it says, "When those around him saw what was going to happen, they said to him, 'Master, shall we strike with the sword?' And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear." John's gospel tells us that was Peter. But Yeshua answered and said, "Stop this now." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. When push came to shove, Yeshua faced that test by demonstrating, by living out what he had always preached. He rebuked Peter, right? He said to him, "No, this is not the way we do it." And he blessed the one. He healed the one who had acted as his enemy. And the next day, Yeshua, Emmanuel, God with us, demonstrated for us what it is to love your enemies. When he stretched out his arms, when he cried out to the Father, when he prayed for those who were ripping out his beard and spitting at him and inflicting him with horrible pain, he cried out, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Peter saw that too. And eventually, he began to learn how to put Yeshua's teaching into practice in the real world. And then when he was writing to believers who were suffering, writing to believers who were being mistreated, who were being persecuted, who were being relegated to the edges of society, when everything in them wanted to lash out, when everything in their nature wanted to strike back, he says, "Listen, remember, this is what you were called to." When Yeshua said, "Follow me, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross and follow me," this is what he was inviting you to. In 1 Peter 2:23, he says, "For you were called to this, because Messiah also suffered for you, leaving you an example so you might follow in his footsteps." Verse 23, "When he was abused, he didn't return abuse. While suffering, he made no threats. He kept entrusting himself to the one who judges righteously." 1 Peter 3:9, "Don't give back injury for injury or verbal abuse for verbal abuse, but do the opposite. Give a good word, a blessing, because to this you were called, you were invited." And then in 1 Peter 4:1, he invites us, he calls us to take up arms. To take up arms with what weapon? 1 Peter 4:1, "Therefore, since Messiah suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same attitude," with the same mindset. Do we say we want to follow Yeshua, but when we enter into the difficulties of the real world, we decide we have a better way? Or are we actually going to live out what he called us to take up arms, to deny ourselves, to take up our crosses and follow him? That's what he wants us to do. Let's live our lives in a way that pleases him today.